Hi everyone, it's Gary here, and it's a warm welcome back to the fourth official. Joining me on the show once again is my good friend Mitch. A warm welcome, Mitch. How are we?
Always a pleasure, mate, and always good to be back. How are you?
Very well, mate. Very well. A little bit older than the last time you spoke to me, but yeah, other than that, pretty good. On this one, we are going to be looking back at what's been a busy couple of weeks behind the scenes at Rangers with the re-emergence of Dave King, the temporary appointment of John Gilligan following the shock announcement, I think, of the resignation of John Bennett as Rangers chairman under health grounds just a couple of weeks ago. I think it's fair to say over the course of the last couple of weeks, there has been, um, let's call it a chess match that's been going on between various shareholders and talk of investment from some places, some rumour mongering, some posturing, and a whole lot more. And myself and Mitch will look to try and break down where the land lies and also try and get a little bit of his expertise, given his day job when he's not talking to us as a recruitment person in terms of what needs to be done for Rangers to permanently fill the role, not only as chairman, but also as CEO. So we'll look to kind of pick Mitch's brains in terms of if he had that gig, where would he be looking for that one? But yeah, let's start with the news regarding Mr. Bennett's resignation. Um, when that news broke a couple of weeks back, it certainly caught us all a little bit by surprise, given how quickly that news broke. But I think it was something that the club had to come out with, given the fact that the Red Tops had picked up the story and were going to run with it probably a bit earlier than the Bennett family wanted to let the news come out.
I think so. I actually think the club handled it incredibly delicately and incredibly professionally as well. I think there's not really, given the circumstances and the fact that, as you say, the Red Top got wind of it, in today's world of everybody wanting to be the first person to break the good, the bad, or the ugly. I think the club had to act in the best interest of both the Bennett family and the club. And I also think the way that everything was done in that kind of what we can call a whirlwind 48 hours, was very, it was quite slick how it was done.
Yeah, and I think let's put this out there. We can be critical of some of the decisions made under the Bennett regime, whilst at the same time absolutely wishing him a full and speedy recovery. And hopefully the time stepping back from the club will allow him to be able to do that and make a full recovery from his health issues that he's got now. Unconfirmed, obviously, what are the health conditions that are forcing him to step down, and far be it for us to speculate or comment on that. But we're certainly going to afford him the privacy in terms of being able to kind of deal with that in his own time. But what it does do is further add to the instability behind the scenes at the club. Since the summer, obviously, with James Bisgrove moving to Saudi for a pretty penny with the club Al Qadisiyah. And we've seen him adopt the traditional Saudi gear and some pictures that have broken over the course of the last week or so. Certainly a very different garb to the brogues and the suit that he would have been donning down Edmondson Way. But certainly that was a role that he was promoted into, having done particularly well as a commercial officer. Now, I think his actual standing in terms of being qualified for the CEO role, taking over from Stuart Robertson, I think could be argued. And I think with the benefit of hindsight, we could possibly look back on that and go, well, whilst he was obviously a very well liked figure behind the scenes in terms of what he'd done in terms of increasing the commercial revenues coming into the club, I think things like the Sydney Cup, the delay with the stadium being ready to go for the beginning of this season, which I think led to a huge amount of negative PR and negative spin and just negative thoughts amongst the support at the beginning of this season, and having to take up temporary residence over at Hampden. for the beginning of the season, which saw us then exit the Champions League. Now, that wasn't down solely to the fact we were at Hampden, but it certainly didn't help the fact of being over there. So the legacy, I think, of Bisgrove as CEO alongside John Bennett as chairman, I think when we look back on it, it can't be argued as a period that was massively successful for the club.
No, I mean it, it's a very strange. I think it's such a strange set of circumstances for us to be in with it. When you look at the time frames of Bennett stepping in, and when you look at obviously Bisgrove moving up and stuff, and I think a lot of people are some of the deals that maybe Bisgrove done now, obviously with the benefit of like the new catering contracts and things like that that are now obviously in the process of now being upscaled and better money and things like that coming in. I think it's very easy in one hand to say that the deals that were done before weren't as good as they look, but they were probably the best we were going to get in the circumstances that we got them in. I think it, it's a bit of a catch-22 of everything's fantastic with rose tinted glasses on to say, well, these new deals are worth so much more money, they're worth this or worth that, that's all getting done. But I think, you know, probably the deals that were on offer at the time, probably we did maybe get above market value at the time, given our own standing at that particular point. But as you say, things like stadium delays and knowing that these stadium delays were coming and the lack of communication, I think, crippled not only Bisgrove, but Bennett himself. I do think when he did speak, obviously with the interview in the club's YouTube channel, I think he spoke very well, very articulately, and he laid down those foundations of what was happening, when it was going to happen, and what his vision was going to be. Ultimately, we're not going to get to see what John Bennett's vision for the club was going to be, in that 3-5 year plan. But my takeaway from the interview that he did was he certainly started to lay the foundations down.
Yep, no, certainly with that. And as I say, everyone here at Fourth Official wish Mr. Bennett very well. And in terms of an interim replacement, you can't get a bigger Rangers man than John Gilligan, one of the original Three Bears who came in with Douglas Park, with Dave King at a time where the club was on its arse. And there's obviously a great deal of gratitude, I think, that the vast majority of the sport have got to the Three Bears and to King and to Park and to John Gilligan to obviously help us through that period post Mike Ashley and all the nonsense that happened prior to that as well. Now, time hasn't been kind to the Dave King Douglas Park relationship. I think it's fair to say, and that's been a very acrimonious and public spat between the two parties. And whilst obviously Douglas Park doesn't remain in situ at Ibrox in terms of being chairman anymore, he's still obviously a very big presence in terms of his shareholding. And the same, obviously, with Dave King, who's been very actively attempting to try and sell that shareholding over the course of the last kind of 2-3 years, Club 1872 and the likes, and no deal has been there to be done with that. So when that announcement got made about John Gilligan coming back in, Mr. King was very quick on the phone to his friends in the media to get his 2 pence worth or 20 rand or whatever the exchange rate is now into South African money, and he was very forthcoming in terms of what he wanted to try and do in terms of what Rangers needed, some stability, him coming back in as chairman on a temporary basis. He said he would do it for 2 years, and that's been given pretty short shrift by Mr. Gilligan. And what was a very impressive kind of press conference that Mr. Gilligan gave. And I think whilst it was lacking in actual specific detail, you wouldn't necessarily expect that from someone that's an interim charge, but it was very clear in terms of what he wants Dave King to do in terms of, and we obviously saw
And his
this in the
behaviour.
media, so behaving like an adult and not running to the media to spout off and do things behind closed doors and do things for the benefit of the club. And I think it's quite telling that since John Gilligan came out with that, we've not heard any more from Dave King, which I'm quite surprised about, because I expected a little bit of a rebuttal, and we've not seen that.
Do you know what? I'll be honest, I didn't expect a rebuttal after how, when you look at Mr. Gilligan's press conference, I think it was so articulately well handled, but it was also very firm but fair. Of he told Dave King, "You've had your moment in the sun, you've been chairman," and without getting into the particulars of, the court cases and everything else that's followed the Dave King regime, you know, Gilligan's been reminded King of, "You are still a majority shareholder. This is an establishment and a business, and it is business first as opposed to and Dave King second." Whereas Dave King's interest, for me personally, the timing of it was crude, it was crass, and the way that he went about it, as opposed to being an adult, like Mr. Gilligan said, and picking up the phone and speaking to other shareholders and saying, "Look, I would like to volunteer my services on a 18-month, 2-year basis, and here's my proposal of what we can do." As you say in Gilligan's press conference, he was never going to be able to lay out a 2, 3-year, 4-year plan, especially given the fact that his title as we speak is interim chief. But I think the biggest thing for me was he came out, he spoke about it, he tackled the elephant in the room head on, and I think in a roundabout way, professionally clipped Dave King's wings and reminded Dave King of, you might be the largest shareholder here, but you're not the only shareholder. And I think a little sound check to, as you say, a bit of professionalism wasn't the worst thing on the planet to happen to Dave King.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think to echo John Gilligan's comments, so when he was asked whether or not he saw a future for Dave King back on the Rangers board, and the statement was that there is no appetite for King to return to the boardroom at Ibrox. He is still a major investor and can attend the EGM and ask questions, but there's just no appetite for the moment because, one, Dave was here before and he stepped away. Other people stepped up. Douglas Park stepped up, then stepped down. John Bennett stepped up. There is just no appetite. Now, Dave King also was quite vocal in terms of wanting to call an extraordinary general meeting. And again, this was another thing that was given pretty short shrift from John Gilligan in that press conference, stating that it's a little bit unrealistic because EGMs are realistically called by people who wish to change something that the current board don't want to change. So why would we call an EGM? Now, Mr. Gilligan also mentioned about the fresh investment coming into the club. Dave King was quite adamant in stating that he doesn't want to invest any more money into the club. However, did say that he would be looking to look at fresh investment coming in from elsewhere. We've seen rumours of more American money coming in, money from the kind of oil-rich Arab countries is potentially on the table as well. And there may well be the opportunity for money to come into the club, but that would be alongside the existing pillars there. So John Bennett's certainly not taking his money out of the club, despite the fact he's no longer going to be chairman. The same with John Gilligan, the same with Douglas Park. All that money's still there in the club, despite the fact their faces are not at the top of the bar, for want of a better term. So there needs to be a great deal of change from the current regime to want to try and bring Dave King back on board. And I just don't think that dynamic suits where Rangers are in 2024, that they don't really need a street fighter anymore. They need someone to come in that's got a 3 to 5 year fundamental business plan that will be regimented with it and not just want to cause a fight and get us tied down into litigation with 4 million parties, which is something that certainly, if you look back on Dave King's time, that there was plenty of legal wrangles and debates and situations that he
And I
would
think,
manage to entangle himself in.
and I think as well, one of the key things to remember is we're still cleaning up the mess of some of those litigations now. I think the last one there was potentially that was the last of the suits, I think.
The elite one,
And,
yeah.
it, and I think for me, that should be the stark reminder of Dave King was potentially right idea, wrong person at the time. But at the same token, there wasn't exactly an abundance of other people to step in at the time. And for that, as always, as a fan, you say, thanks for your service. But at this current moment in time, just be a shareholder. Like, you've cost us probably nearly as much as you've put in terms of litigations and also PR train wrecks and what that looks like commercially in the wider world as well. Things like when you're looking at new shirt sponsorship deals. Who wants to touch a club that we're currently actively in a court case with another shirt provider? And things like that. And then you look at the overall Sports Direct mess that we ended up in. What retail outlet at that particular point under the King regime wanted to put our shirts out on display when we couldn't even decide whether or not one of the owners of the club should be the sole representative to sell the shirt? It was an absolute mess. And again, something else that wound itself up in court as opposed to everybody acting like amicable adults.
Yeah,
you know,
and that's what saw us go down the route with Castore, who very much took a punt on us as a trying to get into the market, and certainly Rangers have been very good for Castore as much as Castore have been good for Rangers over the last few years. It'll be very interesting when that deal comes up for renegotiation at the end of this current season. Everything I'm hearing suggesting that Rangers and Castore are still very keen to continue working together, and why wouldn't Castore want to continue that partnership? Because it's made them an awful lot of money, and they've seen a lot of their football deals go south over the course of the last kind of 2-3 years, where they've maybe tried to run a little bit too fast before they could walk. And I think maybe a slight realignment of their business model to focus in on 3 or 4 major partnerships rather than trying to do 20 and losing 10 of them quite quickly would be quite savvy. But far be it from me to tell the Bean brothers what to do with their business. But I certainly would imagine that they'll want to come back to the table with Rangers this summer and look to negotiate. And certainly Rangers, as they've done with the Kindred Group, are probably in a much better place now than they were first time round in terms of being able to negotiate those rights and be able to see that with the shirt sponsorship deal with the Kindred Group that was just announced at the start of the season, at record levels of shirt sponsorship from the club with the Kindred Group. So they, again, appear very happy with that partnership with Rangers, and why would they not be?
absolutely. And I think this is the thing, and I think a lot of fans in particular are very guilty of not looking at. A lot of fans look at just one aspect of the commercial partnership, which is money in. But a commercial partnership's got to work in 2 ways of what is that commercial partner gaining out of it. And right now, I would say, one, we as fans, we've always put our money where our mouth is. We'll buy every shirt, we'll buy every football, we'll buy every mug, we'll buy anything. We'll go and put our money into Castore and we'll put it into the shops and everything else. And I think, as you say, I think Castore maybe got a little bit guilty of running before they could walk with some of the other deals. And at this point, if they want to cement their space in the football world, as you say, short, less partnerships but longer term agreements probably is the way forward to say, tell you what, let's get a base or a core group of clubs to say, this is our core five, call it like the Avengers. We've got our core five, and we grow them first before we start saying, okay, let's look at another club in, say, Germany or Austria or somewhere, in an emerging market, call it, but you've got your core base there that's going to bring the money in for them, and I think I mean, we've all seen the shirt sale numbers, let's say that with our teeth back in, you know, we know that as fans, we put our money where our mouth is, and we know that Castore are making plenty of money off the deal,
Yeah,
so
absolutely. So going back to John Gilligan's press conference last week, Mitch, the other big elephant in the room that needs sorted out is the appointment of a new chief executive. We spoke about James Bisgrove a little bit earlier. So since Bisgrove leaving, obviously John Bennett was pulling double duty. So the focus now absolutely is on John Gilligan to pull a rabbit out of the hat and appoint someone because we absolutely need our football operations to be running a hell of a lot smoother than they currently are at the moment. So, quizzed on those essential qualities that a chief executive needs to be successful at Rangers, John Gilligan stated that they need to have strong business acumen, experience, they need to have run businesses where there's pressure, and they need to deliver. It can't be a comfortable business because the stress and pressure of being a CEO of a football club is pretty big. Not half wrong there, John. Then add Rangers onto that, and that becomes tenfold. They need to be a good communicator and getting to the people, and they need to have a tremendous work ethic because it goes without saying it is unbelievably difficult. They need to be a good person, and they need to have the ability. It's not just a 9 to 5 job. Pushed on a timescale, John Gilligan was stated that we have quite a number of people around it who we can pick up again, and they're moving quickly on it. When
There's
you're
one
recruiting,
vital thing.
yeah, you need to 4 or 5 must-haves. That's not really a must-have, but it's pretty close. So we need to see whether or not that's going to be someone that's coming in from the football world or someone from the wider kind of business network. But what we need is someone to be an assertive character, someone to be there on a day-to-day basis via the chairman, and obviously that CEO will be the kind of face of the club on a kind of day-to-day basis, whilst obviously John Gilligan or another in terms of the chairman are a bit more behind the scenes. So in your day job as a master recruiter, if you're given this job on your desk, where are you going?
I actually think as well, there's one thing there that Gilligan picked up, and he said that's been missed there is the club have now also moved to go to a recruitment agency, which is actually one of the smartest things that the club could have done right now, which is to take it out of their own hands and say the candidates, the recruitment agency's job is to go out and find candidates X, Y, and Z and essentially present a shortlist to the club of here's the available targets right now. As fans, and I'm going to be the bad news bear for a moment. We will need to be patient when it comes to this appointment because the good candidates are already in work at the moment and they will have lengthy processes for leaving roles that they're in, whether that be in the world of football or whether that be in the world of business. They're going to have minimum sometimes 60, sometimes 90, and I've even seen 6 month resignation periods. Don't get me wrong, as always in the world of business, with the right price, things can happen. But we will need to be patient. And I think when Gilligan had made the comment there of at best Christmas, lets you know that we're probably a little bit further down the line than what's maybe necessarily been said. But without that commitment to say we've got a short list of 5 right now. For me, when I look at this job, with the day job hat on, don't particularly care if you're a nice person. You can be the nastiest guy on the planet or lady in the planet. As long as you have the backbone to stand up to shareholders, stand up to fans, and stand up for what that blueprint is for success, you instantly command the respect that comes from that. Now, I'm not saying that I want somebody to come in there like an absolute tyrant, but I think that's one of these qualities that, how shall we say, there's a grey area on do we need them to be Mr. Nice Guy because public facing, you want them to be a very good public speaker, somebody who's articulate, somebody who isn't afraid to say things factually, whether that's the good, the bad, and the ugly that comes with running a football club. That person's also going to have the world's thickest skin, especially in the world of not just football, but Scottish football. I think a lot of people, and we've seen it in other clubs in the past, even within our own club in the past, sometimes the nice guy that comes into the role that came from the world of business or came from somewhere else isn't the right guy. because when you come into a beast that is Scottish football, you speak to the media anywhere up to 3 times a week. You have to form smart allegiances with media. You have to be selective in the fights that you want to have with them. There will be some times where you have to stand 10 toes down, sometimes where you go, all right, we got it wrong, and that's okay. But if you're asking me in a professional context, does it need to be somebody from the world of football? Ideally, probably. Does that need to be a football club? Not necessarily. That could be somebody who's been a chief exec of an FA or, and again, that's not necessarily the English FA, that could be any football association across the globe. Somebody that's been in that high pressure conundrum, but when you look at, say a top five or a top 10, performing country, there is expectations that come within that role. But we also have to be pragmatic in the respect of what will our budget allow, or who will our budget allow to bring in. And at that point, you can start to naturally eliminate candidates of the desired qualities start to come down, and you start to fine tune what those desired qualities look like. And I think the biggest thing for the club has to be somebody who has either in the business world restructured a business from point A with a clear roadmap to get it to point B with success. Everything else on the pitch, the club's been, for being honest, it's going through a transition season. We have to have somebody stand in the helm and say, okay, the foundations of the transition's been laid bare, but here's what I would fine tune and what I would bring to the project, and somebody that's going to own that project, if that makes sense.
No, 100%. And I think it's massively important that they get the right person in. Now, it doesn't look like it's going to be St Mirren Vice Chairman Jim Gillespie. He's dropped out of the race. Andrew McKinlay at Hearts doesn't look as if that's a deal that's going to get done either. Anyone that listened to my podcast I did with Scott McIntosh last week discussing the aftermath of the Stephen Naismith sacking at Hearts would suggest that he didn't feel that Andrew McKinlay would be up to the Rangers job anyway, so I'm quite happy to rule him out. Obviously, Adrian Bevington has another one, but it's been quite vocal in terms of his desire to want the job. Again, I don't know if I'd be actively going for someone that's been so vocally saying I want it, but at the same time, he does have some of that pedigree that we were talking about earlier in terms of that experience of high level football organisation and playing the game as being
I
the
will.
chief of the English FA.
I will also say sometimes a candidate coming out a little bit what could be perceived to be gun ho to say I want it also isn't necessarily a bad thing. That's not him begging for a job. That's him saying, I know I can fulfill the role that you have, and I've got a track record that backs that up with the FA. And that's not me saying that I am a Bevington man by any stretch of the imagination, but I think we're going to see more names linked with the job than not linked with the job. It's going to be a bit like the summer transfer window there, where we're linked to about 900 players, and then we're going to the short list is probably going to surprise us, but there's going to be, I would say, at least minimum one candidate on there that none of us have heard of before.
No, I don't doubt that. And we will stay very close to this story over the course of the next couple of months here on the Fourth Official. And as and when anything breaks, we will certainly be here to give you that, whether it's on our Patreon channel or whether it's on our brand new YouTube channel. And over 1,500 of you have already hit that subscribe button and watched in your thousands the 50 plus videos that we've got up on there. And it's a big thank you from all of us here at the Fourth Official for doing that. And make sure you continue to check out everything we do on there, because starting in a couple of weeks' time, we've got a brand new series of the greatest Rangers strikers, counting down your votes in terms of the 50 greatest goal scorers in Rangers history. Really looking forward to bringing you that one in the coming weeks over on our YouTube channel. That will do us for this one, folks. Big thank you, as always, to Mitch. Thanks for your time, mate.
As always, a pleasure. Thank you for having the chat.
And we will speak to you next time. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. Goodbye.